them. Citizens from one country can move freely to another country. In terms of citizenship, one of the issues you look at in the United States is immigration reform. Well, in Europe, if you're worried about going to this country, to this country, to this country within the European Union, you don't need to be worrying about taking a passport and going and being checked at everyone, because you're free to move. There are no barriers to that. And so that helps workers move. And so if there's an opportunity where a country is in more of a need for a certain kind of workers, and you're in another country and you have those skills, it makes it more easy for you to go there if your country does not have those jobs. They're not jobs available, and they're fewer and far between. Citizens can live and work in one country or work in any country within the European Union, I should say. Citizens can vote in only local elections, even if they aren't citizens of that country. So I can vote if I'm working in that territory, in those local elections. The euro is a common currency for most European Union members. Not every single European Union nation uses the euro, though. Most do. Member countries can choose to give up their own currency in exchange for euros. French francs and German marks have been replaced by the euro. Although, if you read the newspaper this week, there's some in Germany that want to see the euro go where? Away. Go away. Guys, what are you doing in my seat? You guys go play with my chair. Alright. Common currency makes trade between countries much easier and less expensive. 12 countries in the European Union do not use the euro. United Kingdom, for example, still uses the pound, the British pound. Go play. There are some images of the European coins, the euro. Since 2007, there are now 27, I think there's a little bit more now, 27 nations that make up the European Union. That's their non-members. There are several countries that are not European Union members, including Turkey, Switzerland, Iceland, and Russia. Turkey, they're a little bit more unstable, their location, and because only a portion of Turkey is in Europe. Many in the European Union don't feel like Turkey should be added, should be joined, because then it expands it to a further area outside of Europe. Switzerland, which has largely remained independent for much of its existence, has one of the world's largest, highest standard of living. They don't want to get involved. They prefer to keep their economy the way it is, as opposed to following the regulations that the European Union requires of its member nations. Because the European Union also has very strict fishing limits, Iceland, which really depends upon its industry of fishing, doesn't want to get involved in it because they don't want to have to live under European Union's control over how much they can fish, and limits to their fishing economy, which has a huge impact on their economy. And Russia prefers to be an independent world leader over its resources. Russia's huge. Russia's got an enormous amount of resources available, and they would prefer to maintain that independence. Okay? So I found that. I thought that was pretty quick, short, sweet. This is from an earlier slide that we went over. Please don't try to write all this down. But this is, we talked about the religious wars, and some of you said you want to hear more about, like, the different wars. What's a politique?
A monarch that changes their religion to based on...
Does it have to be a monarch?
No.
But, okay, a monarch that...
changes their religion for the benefit of the people?
Could. Can I be... Yeah.
Like a person takes like a middle ground between the two religions.
Okay, I don't have to necessarily be a monarch, but we definitely have monarchs that were considered politiques. One would be like Elizabeth I, because even though she was Protestant, she didn't have a hardline stance against the Puritans or the Catholics in England. She, in many ways, considered to be a politique. She steered the middle path. We often look at her as being very Machiavellian in terms of how she could rule. She could be like a lion. She was also very cunning like a fox. And if we think about what she did with her Elizabethan settlement, if you publicly, according to this, you must in England be Anglican. publicly, Anglican. But essentially what you did privately, you're, not going to be like Mary Tudor, was very forceful in trying to maintain Catholicism. So she got the nickname Bloody Mary. Elizabeth was not going to be that strict and stringent outside of your public behavior. If you publicly went out and ridiculed the Anglican Church and openly were boastful about your faith, non-Anglican faith, Catholic or Puritan, then you were attacked, you were targeted, and that's where she could be more like a lion. But the idea was that she wanted to maintain some form of stability, and politics did that. Another prime example is Henry IV. Henry IV was a Protestant who became the first Protestant king of France, realized that France was not ready for a Protestant king. As a politique, he felt that government was more important than religion, converts to Catholicism, and then issues the Edict of Nantes to try to maintain some kind of toleration amongst the Huguenots in France. It's important because by doing so, he is going to help bring about stability in France, which is going to help lay the strong foundation of absolutism in the future. And so that's a politique. Okay? It could be an individual, it could be a group of people. We saw here a couple good examples of monarchs that were politiques. Okay? Going back to the German Civil Wars, that's the Lutheran versus Catholics. This is ended in 1555. That goes back with Charles V and the German Lutheran princes. We know about Charles abdicating and dividing his territories between his son and his brother. Treaty of Canteau-Cambrai in 1559 is going to end the Habsburg-Valois Wars. We're going to see that the conflict between dynasties is going to really come to an end. The medieval dynastic struggles in the future are now going to be based more on country versus country as opposed to this dynastic family versus that dynastic family. In France, we have the Huguenot Wars, or the French Civil Wars. The Huguenots were French Calvinists. France, after the death of Henry II, are going to be followed by his sons, who proved to be very weak kings. Francis II died after only being in power for 17 months. Charles IX was only 10 years old, and he was dominated by his mother, Catherine de' Medici. And then finally, Henry III. Those are the three weak kings that we see in France following the death of Henry II. Anytime you see a weakened monarch, who might want to step in and try to assert more authority?
The nobles.
The nobility, and that's exactly what's going to happen. How did many nobles in Germany try to separate themselves from the Holy Roman Emperor?
Religion.
They changed their religion to Lutheranism. How did many French nobles try to separate themselves from the monarchy?
Change to Calvinism.
They changed to Calvinism, or became a Huguenot. And so that's going on. Catherine de' Medici, trying to settle the issue, formulated a wedding between her daughter and the Huguenot, one of the Huguenot leaders, Henry of Navarre. The night before the wedding, as the Huguenots had gathered to the wedding, an attack took place against the French Huguenots, the French Calvinists. The massacre is going to touch off a wave of violence against Huguenots throughout France. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre will eventually lead into the War of the Three Henries. The War of the Three Henries is going to pit the Catholic Henry of Guise, who had dynastic ambitions, he wanted the crown of France, the French Protestant Henry of Navarre, and the King of France, Henry III. Those are your three Henrys. Henry of Guise will become assassinated. Henry III will be assassinated, which only leaves us Henry of Navarre, who will become king. There was a small group of Catholic moderates, the politiques, that felt a strong monarch would save France, and they favored putting in the hands of the Protestant. Henry IV. Was Henry IV well liked by the people of France?
No.
Yeah, they liked him. He did a lot to help strengthen France and bring about peace.
Does he know all the chicken in the pot?
Yeah, chicken in every pot, something like that, yeah. Another conflict we see. Oh, wait, stop, back up. No, I'm not going to show you this. But we need to make sure we understand. If I'm talking about the religious conflict in France, I want to know the political and religious element. What are the religious issues? Catholic versus Huguenots, right?
Yeah.
Princes adopting a faith of Calvinism, Huguenot, to try to separate themselves from the monarch. Is that religious or political?
Religious.
That's more political, right?
Yeah.
We talk about the politiques. Is that religious or political?
Political.
It's political. Henry IV becoming the first Protestant king. You can see the religious element of that, him realizing that France was not ready for a Protestant king and converts to Catholicism. Is that political or religious? Political. So can we understand that there were religious conflicts between the Huguenots and the Catholics, but there was also that political element that we need to be able to discuss in detail as well. If we go on to the Dutch Republic, we talk about Philip II, who inherits this territory from his father. His father got along as a Flemish person. He got along with the people in the Netherlands. However, the Flemish looked at Philip II as being Spanish. And they did not get along with the son of the emperor as well. Just like his dad, he wanted to make Spain and all its territories Catholic and maintain political and religious unity. Wanted to restore Catholicism in all areas that had become Protestant. When we think of the Dutch, we think of middle-class merchants. How did the Dutch make a lot of money? Fishing and trade. And when we think of the Dutch, we think that a couple things. We think in the future the Dutch will be looked at as being very tolerant. People from various backgrounds were welcome in the Netherlands. They weren't persecuted. In France, there was a lot of, belief like Louis XIV absolutism, and the Dutch stood for more, constitutionalism. And so those are some elements that are going to emerge from the Dutch. But again, business sense. What was it that John Calvin said about work? And if I am a middle-class merchant, what is a great sign of my hard work? My faith?
Your profits.
My money. My profits. And so many middle-class merchants were attracted to Calvinism because this idea of, any form of labor well done was pleasing to God. They are going to begin to revolt in the Netherlands. One revolt is going to take place where it's going to lead Philip II to send his half-sister Margaret to try to bring about order. Margaret's going to bring the Spanish Inquisition, the church court to try out heretics to try to stamp out Protestantism. She's going to raise taxes to help, pay for the presence of Spain there. It's going to anger many of the Dutch, not just the Dutch Protestants, but also many Dutch Catholics. So we have a conflict in the Netherlands where we see it's not just about religion. We see some Dutch that are Catholic that don't want Spain controlling them. They want their independence from Spain politically, even though they were Catholic. And then you have those Dutch that clearly don't want Spain's influence on them because they're Protestant and they don't want to be under the control of this Catholic monarch in Spain. All of these actions will eventually lead to Protestant uprisings. Protestant will go into Catholic churches and destroy the statues, destroy the stained glass windows, and just create havoc. It's going to lead to Philip II to send in a guy by the name of Duke of Alba. The Duke of Alba is going to ruthlessly enforce this Inquisition in the Netherlands. His actions with some 20,000 Spanish troops are going to lead to some great criticisms, even from Margaret herself. She will resign her regency because of the brutal nature of which the Duke of Alba pursued this Inquisition. The council that was created, his own tribunal, was known as the Council of Blood. and executed in one day alone some 1,500 men for heresy. Okay? So the Council of Blood is an example of this action. Okay? The Dutch revolt will grow. It'll become a civil war between Catholics and Protestants in the Netherlands, but it'll also become a division within the 17 provinces of the Netherlands with Spain. The 17 provinces were led by, or really under the united effort of Prince William the Silent. Farnese, in order to put down this rebellion, will send in Alexander Farnese to crush the revolt. Farnese is going to use German missionaries, paid soldiers. This also angers the Dutch because the Spanish are fighting against them without even their own men. They're using mercenaries. Eventually, Farnese is going to be able to win victory after victory after victory and continue to march up all the way up to the city of Antwerp. And after he got to Antwerp, what did the Dutch do?
He flooded.
They broke open the dikes and flooded the fields, flooded the land. And that's where Farnese's troops will be stuck. Okay? That's going to mark the furthest extent of the control, okay, of the Netherlands. The northern provinces, the 7 provinces in the north, or the 10 in the south are going to become under Spain's control. The 7 provinces in the north are going to unite under the United Provinces of the Netherlands, under a union of Utrecht, although Spain and Philip II never accepted that division. Accepted that they were united from Spain. Elizabeth I, Protestant, is being pursued by the United Provinces of the Netherlands for support. There's a long tradition of economic support and relations, I should say, between the English and the Dutch in the world trade and the manufacturing of wool. There's a long tradition of a relationship between them. But the Queen of England is reluctant to aid the Dutch because she doesn't want to upset who? In England. The Catholics, yeah. Remember, she knows there are Catholics in England. She just came over from Mary Tudor, who tried to reinstill Catholicism in England. So she doesn't want to alienate them. She doesn't want to upset them. And not only that, but who is in England trying to take the place of the Queen because she feels that Elizabeth is not the rightful monarch? Her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. And she doesn't want the Catholics of England having any more reason to try to plot against her and have Mary, Queen of Scots come in. However, her moderate stance, again, that Machiavellian stance to try and steer a middle path, is eventually going to be challenged. And one too many attempts on her life is going to lead her to eventually begin to support the Dutch. It'll also lead to the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Elizabeth finding a letter linking her, Mary Stuart, Mary, Queen of Scots, to trying to plot against the Queen will lead to Elizabeth ordering her execution. When that event takes place, it's going to be the final straw for Philip II. The Pope is going to offer a large sum of money for the first Spanish soldiers that can step foot in England. And we see Philip II begin to organize a huge fleet of ships known as the Invincible Armada or Spanish Armada. Remember, who's at the peak of power at this time in Europe?
Spain.
Philip's going to fight off England's navy if attacked, and they're going to eventually rendezvous with Farnese's troops to fight against the Netherlands and defeat them. But the Spanish Armada, the so-called Invincible Armada, in 1588 was defeated. And your book talks about a lot of different things. Smaller, more maneuverable English vessels, poor conditions at sea, poor water on the ships. All of these things, tactics that the British soldiers used at sea, all those things will eventually lead to the Spanish being defeated. Okay, the symbolism of this is the ascent of England as a great naval power in Europe and the beginning of Spain's decline as a great power in Europe. Politically, what's the issue in the Dutch revolt?
Oh, they have trade with the Dutch? They trade with Dutch a lot?
Well, yeah. The idea that members
they
of the
could be
Netherlands,
next.
the Dutch,
They could
wanted to be independent. They wanted to be independent. They were protesting these taxes that were being placed upon them. The Dutch citizens were taxed higher by Spain than the Spanish citizens were. The Dutch didn't like that the Inquisition was being brought and forced upon them without any of their consent. And they wanted to separate themselves from Spain. So that's the political issue. What about the religious issue? Clearly, Calvinism versus Catholicism. The desire to try to separate themselves from this Catholic Spanish kingdom. Okay. 30 Years' War. 3 phases. It's going to start out all about religion and eventually move to become more political. If we go back and we look at Europe, the image that we think of is, after this time period, we can really think about the northern portion of this with predominantly what religion? Protestant. The closer you got to Rome, more Catholic. We have this area of Bohemia that is going to come under the control of Ferdinand of Styria, the Habsburg. These areas of Bohemia had a large population of Protestants, Calvinists, and they were converted Calvinists in that area. Well, the Peace of Augsburg of 1555 says the religion of the prince should be the religion of the subject. Does that treaty say anything about Calvinism?
No.
And what about this? What if this area was under control of a Protestant that allowed these areas to become Protestant because the religion of the prince, religion of the subject? What if that now house dies out